Zoe Grunwald and political correspondent for LBC. Once again, welcome back to both of you. We're going to start with the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, one of a lot of the papers that is focusing on what the new cabinet reshuffle might mean for the government and the policy going forward. The headline, PM to move migrants to army barracks. So what is likely to be announced by the new Home Secretary?
So this is a story based on what Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, is going to do now she's in that department. And the story at the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, and indeed actually the front page of the Sunday Times as well, is that she's going to move migrants from asylum seeker hotels into military bases, so former military bases, within weeks. So this is former MOD land, former barracks, and she says she's going to move them into that land. This is all, of course, to try and close those asylum hotels as soon as possible. They think this could see dozens of hotels closed within the next few months. On top of this, there is briefing around that she's going to try and reform the European Convention on Human Rights to something that I think she and other people in the cabinet have been keen to do. Of course, she's the new Home Secretary. These plans she hasn't just worked these plans out in the last 24 hours. These are plans that have been basically drawn up by Home Office officials and by the former Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, too, but she is now wanting to plough on with these. And finally, the other really interesting thing coming out of what could happen in the Home Office is a kind of one-in, one-out deal with Germany. So there's already this one-in, one-out deal with France, but apparently a deal with Germany could look similar. Of course, people aren't coming over from Germany on boats, but it would be potentially if you come from Germany over from France, then you would go back to Germany. So lots of stuff there, and I think they were trying to brief that out quickly to kind of make the point that they say Shabana Mahmood is going to be much more radical on migration and much more right-wing, actually, as well, than Yvette Cooper.
Well, yes, and a lot of the commentary around the reshuffle on Friday, which followed, of course, Angela Rayner's resignation, was that the new people are going to come in, they're doers, they're fixers, they're people that are going to take action. And it's not just the Home Office, but it does seem to be a lot of focus on targeting the issue of immigration.
Yeah, absolutely. This is seen by this government as the kind of pinnacle issue, the most important issue for voters across the country. And, you know, previously when this government was first formed, there was a lot of discussion about Rachel Reeves and how she would essentially be the kingmaker when it came to deciding whether Labour would get another term in office. You know, voters would need to feel richer and better off. Now, actually, that conversation has shifted towards the Home Office and the role of the Home Secretary. In the papers, there's been some briefing about actually a breakdown in relationship almost between Keir Starmer and the former Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, because she wasn't getting enough done on this issue. And we know that the issue of small boats and immigration has crept up voter priorities. So it's less seen to be kind of in the domain now of Rachel Reeves and the Treasury and more in the domain of the Home Office for those inside this current Labour government.
Isn't it astonishing, though, that basically loads of briefing around that Yvette Cooper didn't do enough in the Home Office and didn't actually succeed, but actually she's just been demoted to being Foreign Secretary? I mean, Foreign Secretary is one of the best gigs you can possibly get.
It's a sideways
step, at the very least, yeah. So I think it's really interesting that even though there's briefing around that she wasn't quite doing enough in the Home Office, that she wasn't quite succeeding, that actually she hasn't been sacked or demoted. She's just been, yeah, as you say, moved sideways to potentially the best job in government.
And let's turn to, this is a story inside the Times. This is page 4 of the Times, and they're focusing on some of the other fallout from Angela Rayner stepping down on Friday, because she had 3 roles: Housing Secretary, Deputy PM, but also Deputy Leader of the party. And that's an elected role, isn't it? And so a lot of chat in the papers about what that deputy leadership contest could mean for the party and who might be running in it.
Indeed. And this, I think, is one of the reasons that Keir Starmer was so keen for Angela Rayner to remain in place. The start of the week, he was so complimentary about her still, and I think this was a lot of the reason, because he desperately did not want to have an incredibly fractious deputy leadership contest, but alas, it has been thrust upon him. So we don't know exactly when it's going to happen. Some people I've spoken to suggest that actually it won't happen until after Labour Party conference now, but they will decide on Monday the exact timeline of that. And the reason this is going to be so difficult and so fractious is because Keir Starmer is seen seen as being pretty unpopular with the Labour membership. So when people are trying to win the vote of the Labour members, and those are the people who will decide who becomes deputy leader, you can imagine them being pretty rude about Keir Starmer and saying how they would hold him to account, and actually that being pretty toxic for the Starmer project. But the Sunday Times today reporting that Louise Haigh, the former Transport Secretary, who had to resign after it emerged she'd pleaded guilty to falsely telling police in 2013 that her work phone had been stolen. She has apparently told friends she is going to run. She's on the kind of soft left of the party. People like Rosina Allen-Khan too apparently considering it, talking about Shabana Mahmood. Apparently she might run as well. So there will be Cabinet Minister, I'm sure, running. And also Richard Bergen, apparently the former Shadow Justice Secretary under Corbyn. Apparently he's not answering questions. I actually asked him myself on Friday whether he was going to run. He never replied to me.
Oh, interesting stuff. So it could be a bit of a flashpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that Labour, even as best, is very, very factional, and particularly this government has, for many, many in the core Labour membership, but members as well who've already rebelled against the government whip on things like welfare and the two-child benefit cap. This is a government that is seen as, by many, as not really being, at one with those kind of the soft left or the left of the Labour Party. So you could definitely imagine that this will become an opportunity for MPs across the party to start to air their grievances with the party leader and talk about the kind of direction the party's going to go in. And this is happening at a time where Keir Starmer is already getting attacked by, of course, Nigel Farage, voters, the Tories. It's just not what you want overshadowing the Labour Party's conference.
Another group of people upset with the government featured inside the Observer. This is the march yesterday in support of Palestine Action, which the government has recently prescribed a terrorist organisation. This is page 5 of the Observer, Zoe, and they are calling it here. I don't know who it is they're quoting. Maybe it's somebody in the piece. Labour's poll tax moment.
Yes. So the Defend Our Juries campaign group that helped to organise this latest demonstration against the prescription of Palestine Action had aimed to have at least 1,000 people arrested. It wanted this to be Labour's poll tax moment. That moment where the government was really being held to account by the will of the people. By 7 p.m, 150 arrests had been confirmed. But if you read this report, it's really astonishing the amount of elderly people, disabled people who were said to be taken away by police. People who were coming here to oppose the genocide, what they call the genocide in Gaza, saying that they support Palestine Action or they support people coming out to defend the rights of Palestinians. And of course, the Met dealing with this in quite a heavy-handed way, because obviously we know this group is a prescribed terror group now.
Although they've talked about abuse that their officers have received. Yeah,
they say officers, according to the Metropolitan Police, faced physical and verbal abuse when they were trying to, and from people who were trying to disrupt the arrests of those holding signs. So this isn't something that's going to go away. This is going to continue to be a real issue for Labour members, but also people across the country who do not, who are terribly upset about what's happening in Gaza. And of course, the prescription of Palestine Action really has become the flashpoint here, where people say, how can you prescribe a group that is opposing what is happening that the whole world can see?
But the government will justify its move and say there's information that they have that has led them to this decision, which they're not necessarily sharing.
Exactly, and I think this is, as Zoe says, why it's such a flashpoint and why it's difficult for people to understand, because there is lots of information the Home Office says that they have, which hasn't been necessarily shared with the public. I mean, we talked about Shabana Mahmood and things she was going to change in the Home Office. I wonder whether this will be something she looks at, not necessarily de-prescribing Palestine Action, but just looking at whether there needs to be more information given, which would potentially stop or slow down the number of people going to these protests.
Let's talk about the Reform Conference, which perhaps got slightly less coverage than it might have done if it hadn't been for all the ructions in the Cabinet. Inside the Observer, an article here about one of the speakers, Aggie.
Yeah, that's right. So, as you say, Reform Party conference did not get the coverage that I think it expected to get. Nigel Farage, in fact, moved his speech forward to 1 p.m. on Friday so that he could react to the reshuffle. I don't think that was covered by everyone in the way that it might have been otherwise. But one of the things that, therefore, I think has potentially got slightly less attention is this extremely controversial speaker who spoke yesterday. So this is a British cardiologist, Dr. Aseem Malhotra. He went on stage at Reform Party conference. He was obviously invited to speak, and he claimed that it was highly likely vaccines may have had factors in cancers among members of the royal family. Now, that is not true at all. So that is a really weird thing. It's just categorically untrue for him to say. And the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has criticised Reform actually for giving a platform to, as he calls it, poisonous lies. And Reform Party spokesperson has then tried to distance themselves from what they've said. They don't endorse what he said, but stress they believe in free speech. But I think what's really difficult for Reform UK here is they are trying to professionalise. They are trying to prove that they are a party that could be in government in 3 years' time and that they would handle that well and everything would work, well, they say better than it does at the moment. So I think having people extremely controversial speaking at their conference like this is very, very difficult for them.
And one of the messages that Nigel Farage wanted people to go home with was that was a call for discipline. We've only got about 20 seconds. Sorry, I've given you no time to comment on that at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, you know, Reform claimed that this is a free speech issue and they want everyone to have the right for free speech. But when we know that there are a falling number of parents seeing their children getting vaccinated, we know there are outbreaks of things like measles again, I think it is a real concern that someone's able to make these claims at a supposedly professional party conference.
Beautifully done in very little time. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to have your company this morning. Thank you.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent.